Welcome back to Cinema Decoder X. Today, we're diving into a fascinating movie called Cleaner. Released in 2025, this film has been creating quite a buzz among movie lovers everywhere.
If you loved this breakdown, hit that subscribe button, join the Decoder X community, and let's keep the conversation going,
so you never miss our latest movie breakdowns and honest reviews. Now, let's get started.
Cleaner, 2025, follows the story of Joanna Locke, played by Daisy Ridley, a former soldier who now works as a high-rise window cleaner in London's Canary Wharf. Every day she faces dizzying heights, cleaning glass towers that represent the corporate elite. Beneath her calm, practical surface, Joey is a survivor. Her military past has left her with deep scars and skills that will soon become essential. She lives with her autistic older brother, Michael Locke, played by Matthew Tuck, who spends most of his time researching and exposing corruption in care homes and big corporations. Their difficult childhood is revealed through flashbacks that show how Joey learned self-reliance and developed a protective bond with her brother after their parents' deaths. At the beginning of the story, Michael is expelled from his care facility after clashing with administrators. Joey, unable to leave him alone, takes him along to work at One Canada Square, a massive skyscraper owned by Agnian Energy, a company hosting a grand shareholder gala that day. Inside the building, executives, investors, and high-profile figures gather for a glamorous event celebrating Agnian's latest achievements. Outside, Joey and her co-worker Noah, played by Taz Skylar, begin their day cleaning the upper floors of the tower, unaware that chaos is about to erupt inside. A radical eco-activist group called Earth Revolution infiltrates the building during the event. Their mission is to expose Agnian's alleged corruption and environmental crimes. Initially, the group's leader, Marcus Blake, played by Clive Owen, presents himself as an idealist who wants to use peaceful pressure to reveal the truth. But within his team lies a more violent faction led by Noah, Joey's co-worker, who is secretly working with the extremists. The activists unleash sleeping gas and seize the building, taking hundreds of guests and employees hostage, including Michael. The police surround the tower while Joey, still on the building's exterior, becomes the only person who can move unnoticed and potentially save those trapped inside. As the authorities establish communication, Superintendent Claire Hume, played by Ruth Gemmell, and Detective Inspector Khan, Ray Farron, try to negotiate with the group. However, the situation escalates when Noah kills Marcus Blake and takes control, declaring his plan to detonate explosives unless Agnian admits to its crimes live on global broadcast. His version of justice becomes revenge. Joey realizes that her brother is inside, and despite her fear, she uses her military skills and knowledge of the building's structure to climb, infiltrate, and outsmart the terrorists. The story turns into a tense vertical thriller as Joey navigates the glass walls and ventilation shafts, avoiding cameras and guards while the police coordinate from outside. She becomes an unseen force of resistance, taking out armed men one by one using improvised tools from her cleaning gear, harnesses, cables, and hooks. Inside, Michael discovers data files on Agnian servers that confirm the company's crimes. With the help of Z, played by Flavia Watson, a young tech expert among the activists who begins to question Noah's leadership, Michael starts leaking the information to the outside world. The emotional heart of the film lies in Joey and Michael's connection. Even as chaos unfolds, they communicate through walkie-talkies and coded signals, recalling childhood memories that guide their strategy. The building itself becomes a metaphor, polished on the outside but hiding corruption within. Each floor Joey ascends represents another step toward truth and justice. The tension builds as Noah's paranoia grows and he realizes someone is sabotaging his plan. He arms himself with a dead man's switch connected to the explosives, threatening to destroy everyone if he dies. The climax unfolds during a violent confrontation at the top of the tower. Joey faces Noah in a battle that combines physical endurance and emotional intensity. In a desperate move, Joey attaches the bomb trigger to herself, forcing Noah into a fight he cannot control. Their struggle shatters glass panels and sends debris raining down the building. In the final moment, Noah loses his balance and falls, detonating his own bomb vest as Joey narrowly survives. The explosion is contained, and the hostages are rescued. After the ordeal, Michael's leaked files expose Agnian's corruption, leading to a nationwide scandal. However, justice remains uncertain. The company's executives attempt to shift blame, and political figures scramble to cover up their involvement. Joey and Michael retreat to a quiet coastal town, trying to rebuild their lives away from the chaos. The final scenes show Joey cleaning windows again, this time on a small seaside cafe, symbolizing peace and a return to simplicity. Supporting roles include Howard Charles as Captain Royce, the head of the Tactical Police Unit, and Rufus Jones as Jeffrey Milton, the ruthless CEO of Agnian Energy. The film was written by Simon Utley, Paul Andrew Williams, and Matthew Orton, with direction that focuses on realism, moral conflict, and tension rather than spectacle. Cleaner, 2025, is more than just an action thriller. It explores themes of morality, redemption, and the cost of truth. Joey's transformation from a woman who quietly erases others' messes to someone who exposes hidden corruption defines the heart of the film. The bond between siblings and the idea of cleaning, both literally and morally, run through the story, giving this fast-paced thriller emotional depth and purpose. Cleaner, 2025, is one of those upcoming thrillers that has caught the attention of audiences due to its intense storyline and a strong lineup of talented actors. In this video, we will explore every important aspect of the movie from production to performance. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, make sure to subscribe and stay updated with more reviews and detailed breakdowns like this one. Cleaner is directed by a filmmaker known for delivering fast-paced and tightly written stories, and this time the vision is no different. The movie combines suspense, drama, and emotional tension, making it a must-watch for fans of psychological thrillers. Cleaner, 2025, revolves around the life of a man who works as a professional cleaner for crime scenes. His job is to remove every trace of violence, every mark of blood, and every sign of the incident that once took place. But when he unknowingly cleans up evidence from a major crime connected to powerful people, his life takes a dangerous turn. The story moves from being a simple job-focused drama to a high-stakes thriller where survival and truth become his only priorities. The movie explores guilt, morality, and how far a person can go when their past starts to collide with their present. The direction of Cleaner, 2025, is sharp and focused. The director uses subtle camera movements and realistic lighting to make every scene feel believable. The atmosphere created through muted colors and controlled pacing builds tension gradually, keeping the audience hooked till the end. The editing is crisp and ensures the story never slows down unnecessarily. Each frame adds something meaningful to the narrative, whether it is revealing character emotions or setting up a new twist. The cinematography is one of the strongest parts of the film, capturing both the psychological depth of the protagonist and the haunting environment of his world. Music plays an equally important role in Cleaner. The background score complements the suspenseful mood and enhances the emotional intensity of the scenes. During moments of confrontation, the score grows louder and heavier, while in personal scenes it becomes softer and more reflective. This balance allows the audience to connect more deeply with the character's inner struggle. The sound design is also detailed, emphasizing every little noise that contributes to the unsettling atmosphere of a crime scene. In terms of technical departments, Cleaner stands out for its production design. The crime scenes look disturbingly real, and the level of detail in each location shows how much effort went into research and set construction. The lighting design helps maintain the film's gritty tone, while costume design reflects the characters' personalities and their place in the story. From the lead actor's practical uniform to the antagonist's intimidating style, everything feels authentic and intentional. The performances in Cleaner are one of its major highlights. The lead actor delivers a powerful portrayal of a man caught between morality and survival. His expressions and body language communicate fear, confusion, and determination with natural ease. The supporting cast also gives strong performances, each character contributing something valuable to the overall story. The antagonist, in particular, leaves a lasting impact with a performance that combines charisma with menace. The chemistry between the characters adds to the realism of the movie, especially in scenes filled with emotional conflict or physical danger. Cleaner went through an intense production phase. The pre-production process involved detailed research into crime scene cleaning procedures to make the film feel as real as possible. The filming took place across various urban and industrial locations to give the story a grounded and believable setting. Post-production was equally meticulous, with careful attention to sound, color grading, and editing rhythm to maintain tension. The budget of Cleaner, 2025, is moderate compared to large-scale action movies, but every penny appears to have been used effectively on screen. The film does not rely on visual effects but focuses on realism and storytelling, which gives it a stronger emotional connection. As for the box office, industry experts are predicting good performance due to the film's strong concept, marketing, and word-of-mouth appeal. The story of Cleaner is both thrilling and thought-provoking. It raises questions about morality, ethics, and the hidden world behind crime cleanups. The narrative keeps the audience engaged by revealing information step by step, with twists that come naturally rather than feeling forced. The climax is intense and satisfying, leaving viewers with a sense of closure while still making them think about the deeper message. In review, Cleaner, 2025, offers a gripping experience that blends suspense, realism, and emotional storytelling. It is not just a thriller but also a study of human conscience and choices. The direction, acting, cinematography, and music work together perfectly to create an atmosphere that is both unsettling and captivating. Whether you are a fan of crime dramas or psychological thrillers, Cleaner, 2025, promises to deliver a complete cinematic experience that stays with you long after the credits roll. So watch this video till the end to explore everything about Cleaner, 2025, and discover why it might become one of the most talked about movies of the year. Cleaner, 2025, opens with an image that defines the movie's tone and central metaphor. Joanna Locke, played by Daisy Ridley, is suspended hundreds of feet above the ground, cleaning the glass facade of a towering skyscraper in London's Canary Wharf. The reflection of the city stretches endlessly across the glass, and in that reflection, we see both the world she keeps clean and the one she cannot control. This opening instantly establishes her profession, her isolation, and her quiet endurance. Beneath the surface, the film begins layering its emotional subtext. Joey is not just cleaning glass but also trying to scrub away the stains of her past. Her life revolves around her autistic brother Michael, played by Matthew Tuck, who spends his time obsessively investigating corruption within major corporations. Their bond is strong but strained by the weight of their difficult childhood and Joey's sense of responsibility. The setup unfolds calmly but with tension simmering beneath it. We meet Noah, played by Taz Skylar, Joey's co-worker, who flirts and jokes with her while masking his real identity. He is part of an underground activist group called Earth Revolution. Meanwhile, inside the skyscraper, preparations are underway for Agnian Energy's gala, an event celebrating a supposed breakthrough in clean energy. This is where the story's moral question begins to form, the gap between public virtue and hidden vice. The film's first act quietly sets up the characters' motivations: Joey's need for stability, Michael's mission for truth, and the corporate world's facade of progress. The inciting incident arrives when Earth Revolution infiltrates the gala under the pretense of exposing Agnian's crimes. Joey, working outside on the building's upper floors, watches as smoke rises from inside. Guests collapse as sleeping gas fills the room. What initially appears to be a peaceful protest rapidly turns into a full-scale hostage crisis. This shift is the story's first major pivot, from everyday drama to intense thriller. Joey becomes an accidental witness, stuck on the outside yet closer to danger than anyone else. As the rising action builds, the film alternates between Joey's exterior perspective and the chaos unfolding inside. Marcus Blake, played by Clive Owen, is introduced as the group's leader, a man torn between moral conviction and desperation. His calm, methodical demeanor contrasts sharply with Noah's impulsive nature. When Noah kills Blake and assumes control, the narrative takes its first major mid-film turn. This act transforms the conflict from ideological protest to violent terrorism. Now the stakes rise dramatically. Explosives are rigged, the police form a perimeter around the tower, and Joey's brother Michael becomes one of the hostages. The film's structure remains linear but uses strategic cross-cutting to maintain tension. We see the police negotiation team, led by Ruth Gemmell as Superintendent Claire Hume, struggling to communicate, while Detective Inspector Khan, Ray Farron, suspects an inside link between the terrorists and corporate insiders. Meanwhile, Joey begins her transformation from passive observer to active hero. She climbs, sneaks, and fights her way through vents, elevators, and ledges, using her military training and cleaning equipment as weapons. The narrative cleverly mirrors her physical ascent with her moral awakening. The higher she climbs, the more she exposes both literal and metaphorical corruption. At the midpoint, Michael discovers files on Agnian servers revealing years of environmental crimes and financial manipulation. He secretly sends them out to the public through a hacker network. This discovery fuels both his and Joey's arcs, turning them from survivors into truth-seekers. However, Noah realizes what's happening and threatens to kill Michael, forcing Joey to move faster. The emotional stakes peak when Joey overhears her brother being beaten over the radio, pushing her to take greater risks. The story's second major turn comes when Joey confronts Noah's inner circle, including Z, Flavia Watson, a young tech activist who begins questioning the group's violence. Z's decision to help Joey provides a moral counterweight, showing that even within the extremists, humanity still exists. Together, they plan to deactivate the explosives, but Noah's deadman switch makes that impossible. The suspense becomes about timing and emotional endurance rather than brute strength. The final act unfolds as Joey reaches the building's top floor, where Noah has gathered the remaining hostages. The film's pacing tightens, alternating between close combat and moments of silence that heighten anticipation. In one of the film's most striking sequences, Joey dangles outside the tower while lightning flashes in the glass, reflecting her and Noah's distorted faces as they fight. The sound design and cinematography emphasize her physical vulnerability and psychological strength. The climax arrives when Joey steals the bomb trigger and attaches it to herself, forcing Noah into a no-win situation. Their struggle ends with him falling through shattered glass, detonating his own device. The explosion is contained, but the moment leaves Joey emotionally shattered. She reunites with Michael amid the chaos, both physically and spiritually scarred. The narrative closes with a reflective tone rather than a triumphant one. News reports hint at Agnian's corruption being exposed, but also at government officials trying to bury the story. Joey and Michael are shown months later near the coast, living quietly. Joey returns to cleaning, but this time her reflection on the glass carries peace instead of guilt. The final image mirrors the first, Joey against the glass, but now she stands grounded, not hanging. Cleaner's linear structure gives clarity to its emotional rhythm, while its selective use of perspective and reflection deepens the storytelling. The way it reveals information, slowly, through overlapping action and emotion, keeps viewers engaged. Every turning point feels earned, every silence charged with meaning. The film ends not with spectacle but with resonance, completing Joey's journey from isolation to redemption and leaving space for interpretation about what cleaning truly means. Cleaner, 2025, is built on its characters as much as its high-stakes action. Every major role has a purpose that reflects the film's themes of guilt, redemption, and the blurred line between justice and revenge. The story's emotional weight rests on Joanna "Joey" Locke, played by Daisy Ridley, whose transformation drives the entire film. When the movie begins, Joey is quiet, withdrawn, and defined by responsibility. She lives in a small flat with her autistic brother, Michael, and works as a high-rise window cleaner. Her job mirrors her personality, methodical, cautious, and invisible. She literally cleans up after others, erasing the traces of the lives inside those glass towers but never belonging among them. Joey's early dialogue and body language suggest exhaustion and routine. She rarely smiles, keeps her head down, and avoids unnecessary conversation. Her life is one of survival, not fulfillment. Joey's main desire at the start is stability. She wants to protect Michael and maintain a fragile sense of order. Her obstacle is both external and internal. Externally, she faces economic hardship and the looming threat of losing her brother's care placement. Internally, she carries guilt from her past, hinted to be tied to her military service, and a deep fear of failure. She hides behind discipline and precision, controlling what little she can in a chaotic world. Yet, the film quickly shows that beneath her restraint lies strength and compassion waiting to surface. Michael Locke, played by Matthew Tuck, is Joey's opposite in temperament but equal in emotional complexity. He is obsessive, analytical, and idealistic. His autism is portrayed with realism and empathy, showing both his brilliance and vulnerability. At first, Michael's actions seem reckless. He digs into corruption scandals, spends hours on online forums, and refuses to compromise with authority. What he truly wants is truth and accountability. He believes that exposing lies can fix the world. However, what stands in his way is society's indifference and his own inability to navigate emotional nuance. He misjudges people, trusts the wrong ones, and underestimates danger. Michael's relationship with Joey is the heart of the film. She sees him as fragile, while he sees her as afraid. Their bond evolves from codependence to mutual respect as both learn to trust each other's strengths. Noah, played by Taz Skylar, serves as both antagonist and mirror to Joey. When introduced, he appears friendly, confident, and charming, a co-worker who jokes with her and offers help. His early warmth masks deep resentment and disillusionment. Noah is a former activist who has turned extremist after years of failed protests. He believes in justice but through destruction. His ideology stems from betrayal, seeing corporations profit from pollution while activists are silenced. The movie shows subtle cracks in his composure, such as his clenched fists or pauses during conversations about morality. Noah's arc is one of corruption and contradiction. He begins as a man claiming to fight for the planet but becomes the very thing he despises, someone willing to harm innocent people for attention. His downfall mirrors Joey's rise. Marcus Blake, portrayed by Clive Owen, initially appears to be the leader of the Earth Revolution group. Calm and intelligent, he represents the idealist that Noah once was. Marcus wants exposure, not violence. When Noah kills him mid-film, it symbolizes the death of reason and the dominance of chaos. Marcus's short but impactful presence grounds the story in realism, showing that activism can lose its soul when consumed by ego. Z, played by Flavia Watson, starts as a background character, one of the group's tech experts. Her role expands as the story unfolds. She embodies moral conflict within the terrorist group. Early on, she echoes Noah's rhetoric, but as she witnesses innocent people suffering, she begins to doubt him. One of the film's most telling moments comes when Z hesitates to lock a door behind escaping hostages. That small pause marks her internal shift from accomplice to ally. She later helps Michael access the company's files, showing that conscience still exists amid fanaticism. Superintendent Claire Hume, played by Ruth Gemmell, and Detective Inspector Khan, played by Ray Farron, represent the institutional side of the story. Their goal is to manage the crisis without loss of life, but bureaucracy and politics limit their effectiveness. Claire's subtle frustration in her dialogue shows her moral conflict. She wants to act decisively but must answer to superiors who care more about public image than lives. Their presence provides contrast to Joey's direct, personal form of justice. Joey's development is shown through physical and emotional choices rather than long speeches. Early scenes show her following rules and avoiding risk. Once the crisis begins, every decision pushes her further out of her comfort zone. A key turning point is when she chooses to climb back into the building after escaping once. That single action defines her arc. She moves from passive survival to active courage. Her hands, constantly gripping ropes and glass, become symbols of control reclaimed. In one powerful moment, she pauses to look at her reflection on the glass. Dirty, cracked, and human. That reflection shows a woman no longer defined by fear but by purpose. By the film's end, Joey is transformed. She has confronted her trauma, protected her brother, and exposed corruption. Yet the film avoids easy closure. She doesn't become a hero celebrated by the public. Instead, she returns to a quieter life, scarred but stronger. Her final smile, small and tired, is the clearest gesture of change. It's not triumph but acceptance. Cleaner's character work thrives on dualities. Joey and Noah embody redemption versus corruption, Michael and Z represent moral awakening through knowledge, and the supporting cast reflects the conflict between institutions and individuals. Each small gesture and line carries meaning. Joey's final silence speaks louder than any speech, proving that the greatest transformations often happen quietly, within. In Cleaner 2025, the performances of the main cast carry much of the film's emotion and energy, even though the results are not completely even throughout. Daisy Ridley plays Joey Locke, the former soldier turned window cleaner who is forced into a dangerous hostage situation. She gives a grounded and physically convincing performance, showing both strength and vulnerability. Ridley manages to make every high-altitude sequence believable through her body language and expressions. She uses silence effectively, and her ability to convey fear and focus through facial expressions adds depth to Joey's character. Her emotional scenes with her brother Michael, played by Matthew Tuck, bring out a softer side, showing the bond that drives her. One of the most powerful scenes comes when she pauses mid-climb and steadies herself on the rope, a small moment that mirrors her internal struggle between fear and courage. Ridley's performance shines most when the film slows down to let her act through emotion rather than action. Her control over physicality and subtle expressions gives the role authenticity. However, the script limits her emotional range at times, keeping her restrained for too long. Her transformation by the end feels more situational than emotional, as the writing doesn't allow her to show the inner growth that her performance hints at. Even so, Ridley's portrayal holds the film together and gives it the realism and emotional grounding it needs. Taz Schuyler as Noah plays the coworker who turns into an extremist, and his energy contrasts sharply with Ridley's calm intensity. He brings unpredictability and raw aggression to the screen, giving life to a character that could have easily felt one-dimensional. His shift from ally to antagonist is believable thanks to his use of physical gestures and voice control. When Noah's frustration peaks, His speech pattern breaks down, showing the thin line between anger and despair. His best scene comes when his control completely collapses, revealing the human beneath the fanatic mask. Skylar's performance delivers the electric charge the movie needs during its slower midsections. However, the lack of backstory weakens the impact of his emotional downfall. The performance is gripping, but the writing does not fully explain his motives, making some scenes feel rushed or disconnected from his earlier behavior. Clive Owen plays Marcus Blake, the leader of the activist group. His short screen time feels like a missed opportunity because he brings quiet authority and nuance to the film. His performance is composed and layered. With only a few lines, he creates a sense of mystery and intellect. In early scenes, his subtle gestures, like a calm smile or measured glance, make the viewer question whether his intentions are noble or manipulative. Unfortunately, his character exits too early to leave a lasting emotional impact. Owen's talent is clear, but the role doesn't allow him to unfold it completely. Matthew Tuck plays Joey's autistic brother Michael, and his portrayal becomes the emotional core of the movie. His quiet, thoughtful performance adds tenderness to a film otherwise dominated by tension and action. He communicates through small details, a fixed stare, a careful pause before speaking, or a trembling hand when he feels overwhelmed. His scenes with Ridley feel genuine, giving the story heart and showing that the film's stakes are not only physical but emotional. However, some moments stretch believability, especially when his character is shown pulling off major technical feats that don't match his earlier portrayal. Despite that, Tuck grounds the emotional tone beautifully. The supporting cast delivers mixed performances. Flavia Watson as Z plays a tech specialist who switches sides, but her transformation feels rushed. She performs her part competently, but the script doesn't give her enough to express emotional depth. Ruth Gemmell as Superintendent Claire Hume and Ray Farron as Detective Inspector Khan handle their roles as authority figures with professionalism, though both are confined to typical procedural characters who give orders more than personality. Their scenes feel functional rather than emotionally driven. Certain moments stand out for performance alone. The scene where Ridley clings to the outside of the skyscraper and has to face both physical danger and emotional breakdown is a highlight of her ability to express strength through minimal dialogue. Skylar's intense confrontation scene, where his plans unravel, brings a raw and chaotic presence that captures his character's dissent. Matthew Tuck's quiet exchange with his sister when he reveals the truth behind the data is touching and lingers long after the scene ends. Even though the cast works hard to elevate the film, there are moments where dialogue or pacing hold them back. Some emotional beats come too abruptly, and a few lines that should have carried power feel flat because of uneven delivery. Ridley and Skylar both carry their roles with commitment, but the supporting characters often lack enough space to evolve. Still, the performances collectively lift Cleaner above a typical action thriller. Daisy Ridley delivers strength and subtle emotion, Taz Skylar brings energy and menace, Matthew Tuck supplies the heart, and Clive Owen gives brief but memorable depth. The rest of the cast supports them effectively even if not memorably. Altogether, the acting in Cleaner 2025 makes the movie worth watching. The performances breathe life into a script that occasionally falters, proving that talent and emotional truth can make even predictable material engaging. Cleaner 2025 is directed by Martin Campbell, a filmmaker best known for his control over tension, visual rhythm, and grounded action sequences. His direction in this film reflects the discipline of a veteran who understands how to create spectacle through precision rather than excess. Campbell, who has handled major thrillers like Casino Royale and The Foreigner, applies the same crisp realism here, shaping Cleaner as a confined but high-intensity story. His direction keeps the audience constantly aware of height, isolation, and physical strain, using visuals and sound to heighten emotion instead of relying solely on dialogue. From the opening frame, Campbell establishes the tone of danger mixed with quiet resilience. The camera follows Daisy Ridley's character Joey Locke with controlled movement, never cutting away too fast. This choice grounds the viewer in her experience, forcing us to feel every sway of the scaffold and every gust of wind as she hangs above the city. Campbell favors longer takes over rapid editing, especially in the opening sequences, which creates immersion and realism. The pacing is deliberate, letting tension build naturally. By doing this, he ensures that the film's suspense feels earned rather than manipulated. In terms of staging, Campbell uses the vertical setting as both a visual metaphor and a structural device. The skyscraper is not just a location, it becomes a character in itself. The way he positions Joey between open sky and hard glass creates constant pressure. He often shoots from below or above to exaggerate vulnerability, making the audience feel both dizzy and trapped. The action choreography is tightly controlled, focusing on realism rather than flashy movements. Every fall, swing, and shift of weight looks dangerous but believable, and this control is the result of Campbell's insistence on authenticity in physical performance. When it comes to tone, Cleaner balances between action thriller and emotional survival drama. Campbell manages this balance effectively in the first half of the movie. His direction makes the scenes between Joey and her brother Michael feel intimate even when they are surrounded by large-scale events. He uses pauses and small silences to convey emotional distance and care, proving that he knows when to hold back. However, in the second half, his control begins to loosen. As the plot expands to include multiple perspectives and the villain's ideology, pacing becomes uneven. Scenes that should carry emotional or narrative weight are sometimes cut short, interrupting flow. This inconsistency affects how smoothly the story transitions from survival to social commentary. Visually, Campbell relies on a color palette of cold tones, blue, steel, and muted gray, to reflect the emotional emptiness of the corporate skyline. The cinematography feels tight and metallic, which fits the setting but occasionally makes the film visually monotonous. He introduces subtle warmth during the few family scenes, using softer lighting and closer camera angles to symbolize safety. These contrasts between cold and warmth reflect the duality of Joey's world, the harsh exterior she faces and the fragile emotional bond she protects. Campbell's visual approach may seem understated, but it reflects a confident control over mood. One of his strongest directorial decisions lies in the handling of physical space. Rather than relying on CGI-heavy spectacle, Campbell uses real structures and grounded camera placements. This realism enhances tension because the viewer believes what they are seeing. The climbing scenes have weight, the glass reflections distort perspective, and every small sound, the click of a rope, the echo of a voice through metal, adds to the atmosphere. Sound design under his direction works as an emotional trigger. The silence before a fall or the hum of city wind becomes a reminder of isolation and danger. Campbell's collaboration with his actors is also evident. Daisy Ridley's performance carries emotional control, and Campbell gives her the space to act through physical expression. He directs her not as a traditional hero but as a human under pressure. Taz Skylar's antagonist gains complexity through Campbell's restraint. He doesn't exaggerate the villain's motives but instead allows Skylar's performance to show instability through subtle cues. Clive Owen, despite limited screen time, benefits from Campbell's minimalistic approach. His character's brief presence feels powerful because of how Campbell stages him, standing calmly in wide frames while the chaos unfolds around him. These staging choices highlight Campbell's ability to give even short appearances a sense of gravity. However, not every directorial decision works. The film occasionally suffers from tonal imbalance when it tries to merge emotional depth with action spectacle. In moments where the story demands reflection, Campbell sometimes cuts too quickly to maintain rhythm. The editing rhythm, while tight, risks losing emotional weight. There are a few abrupt cuts that break immersion, especially in scenes where the camera should have lingered a bit longer to allow the audience to absorb the aftermath. These quick transitions make certain emotional moments feel incomplete. The final act demonstrates both Campbell's strengths and limitations. The build-up toward the climax is controlled, but the resolution feels slightly rushed. His visual storytelling remains strong, but the pacing betrays the tension he carefully built earlier. Despite this, the direction still manages to maintain viewer engagement until the end. The decision to keep the final confrontation visually simple, focusing on faces and gestures rather than heavy action, shows Campbell's understanding that human emotion drives suspense more effectively than explosions or spectacle. Overall, Martin Campbell's direction defines Cleaner 2025 as a high-concept thriller with grounded realism. His style is marked by confident staging, measured pacing, and attention to detail. The moments where the film falters are not due to lack of skill but rather uneven editing and tonal shifts. Still, his ability to turn a simple premise into a tense, visually coherent story proves his mastery of cinematic control. Cleaner may not reinvent the action thriller genre, but under Campbell's direction, it achieves clarity, focus, and intensity, leaving the audience with the sense that every frame was built with deliberate purpose. The cinematography of Cleaner 2025 plays a central role in shaping the film's tone, emotion, and tension. The director of photography approaches the camera work with precision, using framing and movement to create a sense of height, danger, and psychological isolation. From the very first shot, The film establishes its visual identity through clean lines, stark contrasts, and a restrained color palette that mirrors the emotional coldness of its urban setting. The skyscraper environment becomes both a visual and thematic device, and the camera ensures that the audience never forgets how small the human figures are within the massive structures surrounding them. The film's opening establishes its visual rhythm. A wide aerial shot of the city transitions into a slow, downward pan that follows Daisy Ridley's character, Joey Locke, cleaning the glass surface of a towering building. This deliberate camera movement serves two purposes. It immerses the viewer in the setting's scale while immediately inducing a sense of vertigo. The use of height is not treated as spectacle but as a living presence that dominates every frame. The camera often hovers at a tilted angle or employs long, continuous takes to build tension, giving the feeling that the viewer is suspended in the air alongside the protagonist. Lighting plays a crucial role in shaping both the emotional tone and visual texture. During the day sequences, the natural light reflects off the glass buildings, creating a cold metallic shimmer that reinforces Joey's emotional detachment. The reflections on the windows are often used to show her divided state of mind, literally framing her between two versions of herself, the one trying to survive and the one weighed down by guilt and exhaustion. At night, the film shifts into deep blues and muted grays, punctuated by the red and orange glows of city lights, which introduce danger and urgency. This shift in palette effectively mirrors the transition from external struggle to inner turmoil. Throughout the film, the cinematographer balances wide and tight framing to express contrasting emotions. Wide shots dominate scenes that highlight the magnitude of the setting. When Joey is hanging outside the skyscraper, the camera pulls back just enough to remind viewers of the vertical emptiness surrounding her, emphasizing how vulnerable she is against the vast architecture. These shots communicate both the beauty and terror of the height, grounding the viewer in physical reality. In contrast, tight close-ups are used during moments of decision or fear. A trembling hand gripping a rope, the reflection of eyes in the glass, or the subtle flicker of breath against the cold window. These close shots build emotional intensity and humanize the scale of the story. One of the standout sequences is the long take of Joey climbing across a tilted window frame while a storm gathers around her. The camera moves in steady, controlled motion, staying just behind her shoulder, creating both intimacy and claustrophobia. The rain hitting the lens, the shifting reflections, and the faint distortions in the glass surface give the scene a tactile realism that makes the viewer feel the struggle. This level of immersion is a result of both camera placement and lighting precision. The cinematographer also uses perspective as a storytelling tool. Many scenes are framed from Joey's point of view, placing the audience directly in her line of sight. When she looks down, the ground below blurs slightly due to shallow focus, reinforcing how disoriented she feels. When she looks up, the tall buildings seem endless, a visual metaphor for the challenges closing in around her. This consistent alignment between character perspective and camera perspective allows the audience to experience the story not as observers, but as participants trapped within the same confined space. The color design supports the film's thematic undercurrents. Early scenes feature sterile whites and silvers, representing control and structure, while later scenes introduce shadows and warmer tones as chaos begins to unfold. The progression in color subtly mirrors Joey's transformation, from detached and efficient to emotionally exposed and human. In the climax, when the city lights flicker through shattered glass, the cinematography finally breaks its earlier restraint, using handheld movements and fractured reflections to create a sense of emotional collapse. This moment stands out not because of spectacle, but because it visualizes Joey's internal breakdown with external imagery. Lighting choices further reinforce character psychology. Joey is often illuminated from one side, leaving the other in shadow, symbolizing her moral and emotional conflict. In contrast, the antagonist Noah is frequently lit from below or framed against harsh backlight, which distorts his silhouette and gives him an unpredictable, menacing presence. Even within the same frame, lighting is used to separate the two, Joey bathed in cold clarity while Noah moves within dim, fractured light, suggesting that he thrives in moral ambiguity. Camera movement throughout the film remains controlled and deliberate. Instead of relying on frantic cuts, the cinematographer prefers smooth tracking shots and calculated pans. This restraint adds realism and keeps the tension grounded. During moments of action, the camera rarely loses composure, maintaining spatial clarity and continuity. This approach is reminiscent of classical thriller cinematography, where suspense is built through anticipation rather than chaos. When the film does employ handheld shots, it does so with purpose, usually to express emotional instability or loss of control. Compositionally, the film makes strong use of negative space. Characters are often positioned off-center, leaving large portions of the frame dominated by glass, sky, or steel. This technique visually reinforces the themes of isolation and insignificance in a world built by systems larger than the individual. The reflective surfaces serve as barriers that both reveal and conceal. In one striking shot, Joey's reflection merges with that of the antagonist, symbolizing how similar fear and obsession can appear when mirrored by circumstance. By the end of Cleaner, the cinematography feels essential to understanding the story. It does not simply decorate the film but drives the viewer's emotional experience. Every movement of the camera, every shadow across a face, and every flicker of light across glass is deliberate. The visual language builds tension where words fall short and captures human fragility within towering machinery. The film's imagery lingers long after the credits because it connects physical struggle with emotional truth, proving that its cinematography is not just beautiful, it is integral to the film's storytelling identity. Editing and pacing play an essential role in shaping the experience of Cleaner, 2025, determining not just how the story unfolds but how the audience feels about every moment. The film's editor clearly aims for a balance between suspense and clarity, ensuring that tension lingers but never fully overwhelms the viewer. From the opening sequence, the rhythm of the cuts establishes a mood of precision and unease. Each transition is deliberate, guiding us through the film's world without calling attention to itself. This invisible control makes the early acts particularly effective, as we sense danger building before it's explicitly shown. The editing works to mirror the mental state of the protagonist, tightening and loosening in sync with their internal conflict. The pacing early on is measured, almost patient. The editor allows scenes to breathe, giving us time to observe gestures, surroundings, and silences. This slow rhythm pays off because it builds anticipation. When the first major turning point hits, the tempo quickens noticeably, drawing the audience into a heightened sense of urgency. The contrast between stillness and motion becomes a storytelling tool, showing how calm can erupt into chaos without warning. The transitions between scenes are seamless, often relying on visual or thematic links rather than overt cuts. For instance, a shot of a spinning mop might dissolve into the swirl of a car wheel, connecting two separate moments through rhythm rather than logic. These subtle connections give the film a sense of cohesion even when the narrative shifts between timelines or perspectives. Flashbacks are handled with restraint, used sparingly to deepen rather than disrupt the flow. Instead of relying on obvious cues like color grading or abrupt sound drops, the film integrates memories naturally, letting them emerge through texture and pace. This approach keeps the story grounded while still allowing psychological layers to emerge. The editor understands that suspense often comes not from what is seen, but from what is withheld. Cleaner, 2025, uses pauses effectively. A few seconds of silence between dialogue exchanges can feel heavier than an explosion. These quiet spaces let tension breathe, giving audiences time to process and anticipate. The film's pacing also aligns with its thematic exploration of control and chaos. Long takes dominate moments of routine or precision, while faster cuts take over when the structure begins to collapse. This rhythmic shift is subtle but powerful, showing how the visual rhythm mirrors the emotional descent of the lead character. However, not every section maintains perfect rhythm. The middle act, while visually striking, stretches certain sequences longer than necessary. A few moments linger too long on repetitive beats, slightly dulling the intensity that the first half builds so effectively. The decision might have been intentional, to emphasize monotony or internal struggle, but it risks losing the audience's emotional focus. The climax, in contrast, finds its pulse again. The cutting becomes rapid, even disorienting, which fits the chaotic unraveling of events. The editor's control over time becomes most evident here, as the viewer's sense of duration begins to blur. The final moments slow down once more, offering a release after the storm. This ebb and flow create a rhythm that feels organic, echoing the cycles of tension and relief that define real psychological pressure. Cross-cutting is another strength of the film. Parallel sequences build emotional and narrative tension, connecting seemingly unrelated actions until they collide in a single dramatic payoff. These moments show an editor in full command of pace and structure, understanding how juxtaposition can turn ordinary moments into gripping cinema. Even in dialogue-heavy scenes, the rhythm of cuts is carefully measured. The editor avoids overcutting, letting actors hold the frame long enough for their expressions to register. It gives performances space to breathe and heightens realism. The use of ellipses, Moments skipped rather than shown also enhances efficiency. Instead of spoon-feeding transitions, the film trusts the audience to fill in blanks. That trust keeps viewers engaged as they actively piece together the narrative. Cleaner, 2025, does not rely heavily on montage, but when it does, the sequences are purposeful. They compress time while preserving mood, often accompanied by minimal sound design to keep focus on visual rhythm. These moments punctuate the narrative, marking shifts in the protagonist's journey. Sound editing complements the visual rhythm beautifully. Sudden cuts to silence or shifts in ambient noise underline emotional beats without feeling manipulative. The editor uses these tools to control the film's pulse, alternating between sensory overload and near total quiet. Overall, the editing and pacing of Cleaner, 2025, are among its strongest achievements. They shape how tension is felt, how time is experienced, and how meaning is revealed. Even when certain stretches feel indulgent, the overall rhythm carries precision and purpose. The film understands that good editing is not about speed but about control, knowing when to hold, when to cut, and when to let the story simply breathe. The soundtrack and score of Cleaner, 2025, are not merely background decoration but an integral layer of storytelling that shapes the film's emotional identity. From the first frame, the sound design sets a tone of quiet unease. The composer clearly understands the film's slow-burn nature, using restraint rather than volume to create tension. Instead of overwhelming the viewer with music, the score creeps in gradually, echoing the internal tension of the protagonist and mirroring the psychological grime that builds throughout the narrative. The opening sequence establishes this philosophy perfectly. A minimalist piano motif repeats beneath ambient sounds of water dripping and distant mechanical hums. The simplicity feels deliberate, suggesting both calm and decay. It is a sound that feels clean on the surface but unsettling underneath, much like the story itself. As the film progresses, the music evolves almost imperceptibly. The motifs that first appeared softly begin to distort, stretching in tempo and tone as the plot unravels. This progression gives the score a living quality, as though it too is reacting to the moral and emotional corruption within the film's world. One of the most striking elements of the soundtrack is its commitment to silence. The absence of music in several pivotal scenes is more powerful than any orchestral swell could be. In moments of confrontation or introspection, the film often drops all background sound except for breathing or environmental noise. This allows the viewer to sit uncomfortably with the characters, amplifying realism and heightening tension. The director and composer seem to share a clear understanding that silence can be its own kind of score. When music does appear, it often does so to underline transitions or realizations. A recurring motif tied to the protagonist plays each time they are faced with moral choices. Initially, it sounds clean and precise, light percussion and plucked strings suggesting control. By the film's final act, that same cue returns but warped, layered with dissonant tones, mirroring the character's unraveling sense of self. The manipulation of familiar motifs in unfamiliar contexts is a subtle but powerful storytelling device, reinforcing how perception changes even when the notes remain the same. Licensed music also plays a crucial role. A handful of contemporary songs punctuate the otherwise sparse score, often used during transitional scenes to signal shifts in tone or time. These moments feel intentional rather than commercial. The contrast between diegetic sound, music heard within the scene by characters, and non-diegetic score, music only the audience hears, is handled with precision. One example is a scene where a character cleans a room while a cheerful pop song plays from a nearby radio. The upbeat rhythm clashes with the grim visual tone, creating an unsettling irony. When the song abruptly cuts off mid-verse, the sudden silence delivers a jolt more effective than any jump scare. That sensitivity to sonic rhythm makes Cleaner, 2025, especially distinctive. The composer also uses unconventional instrumentation to deepen atmosphere. Metallic sounds, faint whispers, and reverb-heavy tones mimic the sounds of scrubbing, dripping, and scraping that dominate the film's world. This blending of natural and musical sound blurs the boundary between score and sound design. It feels as if the environment itself is participating in the soundtrack, a living presence that mirrors the protagonist's fractured psychology. In sequences of heightened tension, the score leans into experimental territory. Instead of traditional crescendos, it uses pulsating low-frequency tones and irregular beats that mirror an accelerating heartbeat. This physiological manipulation keeps the audience subconsciously on edge, even when little is happening on screen. The result is a sustained feeling of dread that feels organic rather than forced. The film's climax benefits immensely from the score's careful build-up. By the time we reach the final confrontation, every recurring motif, sound effect, and tonal shift has been leading to this moment. The music swells but never becomes melodramatic. Instead, it pulses like machinery, mechanical yet human, reflecting both the precision and decay central to the story. When the final note drops into silence, the absence of sound lands like a final exhale. The ending uses this silence to full emotional effect, forcing the audience to sit with the aftermath. The score's greatest strength lies in its understanding of balance. It knows when to speak and when to remain silent. There are moments when the composer takes a back seat, allowing natural sounds, footsteps on wet floors, the hum of fluorescent lights, distant echoes, to take center stage. These choices make the world of Cleaner, 2025, feel tangible and immersive. However, the score is not without flaws. In a few scenes, particularly in the middle act, the use of swelling orchestral strings feels slightly heavy-handed compared to the film's otherwise minimalist approach. It risks instructing the viewer how to feel rather than allowing emotion to arise naturally. Thankfully, these moments are rare, and the overall control remains commendable. The soundtrack's greatest accomplishment is how it amplifies the film's core themes without demanding attention. It lingers in memory precisely because it refuses to dominate. Each sonic choice feels tied to narrative meaning, a reflection of guilt, control, repetition, or decay. By the end, the viewer realizes that the film's soundscape has been guiding emotional interpretation all along, even when it seemed barely noticeable. Cleaner, 2025, proves that a score does not need to shout to be heard. Through silence, subtle motifs, and restrained emotion, it turns sound into storytelling and music into memory. Cleaner, 2025, operates on multiple thematic levels, layering psychological and moral questions beneath its sleek thriller exterior. On the surface, it is a story about a professional cleaner, someone whose job is to erase traces of other people's mistakes, but beneath that premise lies an exploration of guilt, morality, and the illusions of purity. The film's title itself becomes metaphorical, pointing to the futility of trying to wash away the stains of conscience. Every frame seems to challenge the notion that one can ever be truly clean. The central theme of moral corruption runs through the entire film. The protagonist, who begins as a detached professional committed to precision and procedure, gradually faces the moral residue of their work. What begins as a mechanical routine becomes a confrontation with responsibility. The film asks whether neutrality is ever possible in a world where one's actions, no matter how procedural, contribute to greater harm. Each cleanup job becomes symbolic of an attempt to erase guilt, yet every act of erasure leaves behind a deeper mark on the self. Identity is another major theme. Cleaner, 2025, examines how identity is built and eroded through repeated acts of denial. The protagonist's life revolves around hiding evidence and maintaining control, but this process strips away individuality. They become defined by the very acts of concealment they perform. The film's use of reflective surfaces, mirrors, glass panels, polished floors, reinforces this idea visually, showing a character constantly confronted by distorted reflections of themselves. The tension between order and chaos forms the backbone of the narrative. The protagonist's obsession with cleanliness and order is more than an occupational habit, it's a coping mechanism for inner turmoil. Every spotless surface becomes an attempt to impose control over moral disorder. But as the story unfolds, we witness the collapse of this illusion. Dirt and blood, both literal and metaphorical, seep into every aspect of their existence. By the end, the film seems to suggest that chaos is not something external to be cleaned away, it exists within the self. Another recurring theme is redemption. Cleaner, 2025, questions whether redemption is an attainable goal or merely another illusion. The protagonist's journey mirrors that of a sinner seeking absolution through ritual, yet the ritual here is cleaning rather than prayer. The more they attempt to cleanse, the more haunted they become. This paradox gives the story its tragic dimension. Redemption requires acknowledgement of guilt, but acknowledgement contradicts the cleaner's entire existence, which depends on denial. The result is an unresolvable tension that fuels both the narrative and the emotional core. Power and control also play vital roles in shaping the film's message. The act of cleaning, of removing traces of others, becomes an assertion of control over truth itself. By deciding what remains visible and what disappears, the cleaner manipulates reality. This theme extends into the broader social commentary of the film, touching on how institutions and individuals curate truth, shaping collective memory through erasure. Cleaner, 2025, therefore becomes an allegory for systems of corruption, propaganda, and revisionism, where cleanliness is equated with legitimacy and dirt with guilt. The film's emotional layer delves into isolation and fear. The protagonist's world is silent, ordered, and controlled, but beneath that composure lies deep loneliness. Their interactions are minimal, functional, and emotionally void. The recurring use of confined spaces reinforces this isolation. Rooms are always too clean, too symmetrical, too quiet. The sterility becomes suffocating, symbolizing emotional emptiness. The film subtly links this isolation to the human need for connection, an unspoken longing that drives the character toward a final act of vulnerability. Another underlying theme is the relationship between memory and guilt. Cleaner, 2025, treats memory as both contamination and cure. The protagonist tries to suppress memories of past failures, believing that forgetting will bring peace. Yet the more they repress, the more those memories manifest through hallucinations, visual distortions, and sound cues. This interplay between memory and guilt forms one of the most powerful emotional currents in the film. The message becomes clear: what is suppressed will always return, and the attempt to cleanse the mind is as futile as cleaning the world. The film also hints at broader philosophical questions about truth and morality. Can morality exist without visibility? If no one sees a crime, does it remain wrong? Cleaner, 2025, toys with these ideas by presenting acts of violence and cover-up in equal measure, blurring the line between victim and perpetrator. The protagonist's moral awakening, if it can be called that, comes not from exposure but from realization. By the time they confront their reflection in the final act, they understand that cleanliness without conscience is merely disguise. The visual and narrative echoes throughout the film strengthen these themes. Every scene of cleaning parallels an emotional or ethical moment. A wiped surface mirrors an attempt to forget. A stain that refuses to fade becomes a symbol of lingering guilt. The recurring imagery of water, whether dripping, flowing, or stagnant, serves as a metaphor for purification and decay simultaneously. The film's use of repetition emphasizes how cycles of guilt and denial perpetuate endlessly until broken by acceptance. The message of Cleaner, 2025, ultimately transcends its crime thriller setup. Beneath the violence and suspense lies a moral meditation on human imperfection. The film suggests that to live without guilt is to live without conscience, and that redemption requires confrontation rather than concealment. Its final moments leave the audience questioning not only the protagonist's fate but their own relationship with truth and self-deception. Cleaner, 2025, becomes a story about the impossibility of total purity, a reminder that what we try to wash away often becomes the deepest part of who we are. Cleaner, 2025, takes a restrained but highly deliberate approach to visual effects and CGI, using them not as spectacle but as an invisible extension of mood, tone, and realism. Unlike the heavy-handed digital gloss that often defines modern thrillers, this film's VFX work serves to deepen atmosphere rather than call attention to itself. The effects are subtle, grounded, and in many cases so seamlessly integrated that the viewer might not even recognize how much of the film's visual experience relies on post-production artistry. The world of Cleaner is meticulously controlled, and that same sense of precision extends into its effects design. Every digital enhancement supports the film's theme of concealment and cleanliness. The color grading, compositing, and digital set extensions all contribute to the feeling of sterile perfection, a world too clean to be real. Many of the environments were shot on location but enhanced digitally to remove imperfections or add artificial symmetry. Cracks in walls are erased, reflections are sharpened, and lighting is manipulated to create a slightly uncanny visual balance. This invisible CGI becomes an artistic statement in itself, a world polished beyond truth. The visual effects are used sparingly but purposefully during key narrative moments. One recurring technique involves the use of digital transitions that mimic the spreading or dissolving of liquid. Scenes often fade through flowing textures, suggesting the spreading of contamination or the erasure of evidence. These transitions are more than visual tricks, they are thematic metaphors, aligning the viewer's perception with the protagonist's obsession with purity. Cleaner, 2025, uses digital enhancements to turn ordinary spaces into psychological landscapes. The most impressive CGI work appears not in action sequences, but in atmospheric manipulation. Subtle visual cues, particles floating in air, reflections that linger too long, shadows that move slightly out of sync, hint at the protagonist's unraveling mind. These digital elements are understated but powerful, creating a subconscious disquiet. The effects never scream for attention but instead whisper into the viewer's awareness, shaping emotion without overt display. One standout scene demonstrates this restraint beautifully. When the protagonist experiences a breakdown, the room appears to shift around them. Walls pulse gently, lights flicker in rhythm with breathing, and reflections distort ever so slightly. None of this is achieved through practical means. Rather, a combination of CGI compositing, subtle warping, and digital color modulation turns the physical space into a living expression of inner turmoil. The result is haunting, a visual metaphor for mental contamination that feels both real and surreal. Cleaner, 2025, also blends practical and digital effects with remarkable fluidity. Blood, dust, and water are often practical on set, but their motion and spread are digitally enhanced in post-production to maintain consistency with the film's hyper-controlled visual language. For example, when a surface is wiped clean, the transition from stain to spotless is enhanced frame by frame to appear unnaturally smooth, an effect that reinforces the sense of artificial perfection. The audience senses something uncanny, even if they cannot identify why. This delicate interplay between the tangible and the digital defines the film's visual texture. There are moments of more obvious CGI, primarily during flashback sequences or moments when the film briefly departs from realism. These scenes use compositing and layering to create ghostly overlays of past and present. The protagonist sees fragments of memory projected onto walls, mirrors, and water surfaces. While clearly digital, these effects are handled with restraint, never veering into spectacle. They maintain the film's tonal consistency, blending seamlessly with the surrounding cinematography. The compositing work deserves particular praise. Cleaner, 2025, relies heavily on reflections and transparency, which are notoriously difficult to render convincingly. The visual effects team employs multiple layers of digital reflection mapping, ensuring that mirrored surfaces behave realistically under shifting light. The effect is subtle but essential, as the film frequently uses reflections to symbolize duality and guilt. The reflections not only show the physical self but often include faint distortions or double images, representing fractured identity. The CGI's realism makes these moments psychologically potent rather than distractingly artificial. Lighting integration is another area where the film's VFX excels. Digital enhancements are matched perfectly with on-set lighting, maintaining consistent tone across natural and computer-generated imagery. The color palette remains restrained, cold whites, muted grays, and sterile blues, reinforcing the themes of clinical control and suppressed emotion. When visual effects interact with live-action elements, such as the diffusion of cleaning chemicals or the reflection of light off wet surfaces, the results are nearly imperceptible, blending physical and digital worlds seamlessly. Despite its subtlety, the film does feature one sequence that clearly showcases technical brilliance. In a key mid-film moment, the protagonist imagines dirt spreading invisibly across a pristine floor. The scene begins realistically but slowly transforms into an abstract visualization of contamination. Dark streaks crawl outward in intricate fractal patterns, generated through particle simulation and compositing. The effect feels both scientific and organic, like watching guilt manifest physically. It is one of the most memorable visualizations in recent cinema of an internal emotion rendered externally through CGI. Not all effects, however, maintain perfect balance. In a few scenes where practical and digital elements mix under intense lighting, a faint artificiality becomes noticeable. For example, the digital fog used in a late-night street scene slightly clashes with the otherwise tactile realism. These are minor flaws in an otherwise impressively coherent visual system. Cleaner, 2025, demonstrates that CGI does not have to dominate to make an impact. The film's use of digital effects is about refinement rather than display, enhancing texture, symmetry, and psychological meaning. In contrast to blockbuster spectacle, where CGI serves to overwhelm, here it exists to disturb subtly, to make the world too perfect for comfort. The seamless integration between VFX and storytelling proves the director's commitment to using technology in service of narrative, not ego. Ultimately, Cleaner, 2025, stands as a masterclass in restrained digital filmmaking. Its effects are invisible yet essential, shaping tone and meaning without drawing attention. Through precise compositing, subtle environmental manipulation, and symbolic imagery, the film transforms visual effects into instruments of psychology. The result is a world that looks immaculate but feels haunted, a mirror-polished surface reflecting the impossibility of true cleanliness. The set design and locations in Cleaner, 2025, are central to the film's psychological depth, functioning not merely as background but as silent characters that communicate tone, theme, and emotion. Every environment in the movie reflects the inner state of the protagonist and reinforces the film's exploration of control, guilt, and repression. The production design, by combining minimalism with uncanny precision, transforms ordinary spaces into stages of moral and psychological conflict. The film's primary setting, a series of sterile modern interiors, immediately conveys the protagonist's obsession with cleanliness and order. The apartments, offices, and workspaces are stripped of personal warmth, dominated by metal, glass, and polished surfaces. Everything is symmetrical, perfectly aligned, and colorless. These details speak volumes about the character's mindset before a single line of dialogue is spoken. The spaces are designed to feel both pristine and suffocating, mirroring how the protagonist's desire for control has erased any trace of humanity from their surroundings. The production team clearly approached every object as a storytelling tool. The props, for example, emphasize routine and precision. Cleaning materials, gloves, and equipment are arranged in geometric order. Even the smallest items, bottles, brushes, towels, are placed with mathematical accuracy. This obsessive arrangement conveys both professionalism and pathology. The audience senses that these objects represent more than tools. They are extensions of the protagonist's psyche, instruments of denial and ritual purification. The repetition of these objects across different settings reinforces the monotony of their existence, suggesting that the protagonist's entire world is a cycle of cleansing and erasure. The use of real locations is carefully balanced with controlled studio builds. Many exterior scenes were filmed in actual urban environments, often at night or during early morning hours to create a sense of isolation. The city feels depopulated, as if the world itself has been scrubbed clean. Streets glisten with rain but are empty of life, and the reflective surfaces of buildings continue the film's recurring motif of mirrored perfection. The location choices emphasize anonymity, no landmarks, no identifiers, just endless concrete and glass. The result is a timeless, placeless world that heightens the film's universal themes of guilt and concealment. In contrast, the interior sets are mostly constructed builds designed for precise visual control. The production design team uses architecture as emotional metaphor. The cleaner's apartment, for instance, is almost entirely devoid of color, with a muted palette of whites, grays, and steel blues. The lighting accentuates the smoothness of every surface, making the space appear antiseptic. Yet, despite its cleanliness, it feels deeply unsettling. The absence of clutter or imperfection becomes oppressive. Every time the camera lingers on a spotless countertop or empty corridor, it underscores the character's emotional void. The design choices reveal how the protagonist has built a cage of perfection around themselves. Other locations, such as hotel rooms and abandoned industrial sites, offer stark contrasts. These spaces are dirtier, darker, and more textured, symbolizing the intrusion of chaos into the protagonist's controlled world. In one particularly striking sequence, the protagonist is forced to clean a room in an old factory converted into apartments. The cracked walls, rusted pipes, and lingering dust stand in sharp opposition to their usual sterile environments. The set design here becomes metaphorical, a confrontation between order and decay. The cleaner's futile attempt to impose control over this space mirrors their internal collapse. The contrast between these environments deepens the film's psychological dimension. One of the film's strongest visual motifs is the interplay of transparency and opacity. The use of glass walls, frosted partitions, and mirrors throughout the sets reinforces themes of reflection and concealment. Characters are often visible through multiple layers of glass, suggesting both exposure and isolation. The production team uses these elements to trap the protagonist visually, placing them in frames within frames that echo their moral entrapment. The reflective surfaces also allow subtle play with lighting and shadow, giving each location a dynamic, almost living quality. The set dressing subtly evolves as the story progresses. Early in the film, the cleaner's spaces are spotless and symmetrical. As the plot unfolds and the character's emotional control deteriorates, small imperfections begin to appear: an unwashed cup, a streak on a mirror, a crooked frame. These minute deviations are easy to miss but symbolically powerful. They signal the breakdown of the protagonist's inner order. By the film's final act, The once immaculate apartment feels hollow and disturbed, its symmetry lost, its light colder and harsher. This gradual transformation of space mirrors the character's psychological unraveling more effectively than any dialogue could. The choice of color in production design is deliberate and thematic. Whites dominate early scenes, suggesting purity but also sterility. As guilt and memory begin to surface, the palette shifts subtly toward grays and muted browns. In flashbacks or memory sequences, warmer tones are introduced, wood textures, sunlight, softer fabrics, contrasting the present's harsh artificiality. These shifts make the viewer feel time and emotion through the environment itself. The designers ensure that color carries emotional weight, functioning as a visual map of the protagonist's descent. Even the smallest props are used symbolically. A recurring cloth, a broken mirror shard, a drop of water on a polished surface, each carries narrative significance. The repetition of water-related imagery connects directly to the idea of cleansing and contamination. Buckets, sinks, and drains become recurring symbols of denial and escape. The production design makes these mundane details resonate with deeper meaning, ensuring that the world feels not just lived in but psychologically loaded. What distinguishes Cleaner, 2025, from many thrillers is how its locations participate in storytelling. Rather than existing as mere backdrops, they act as mirrors to the human condition. The minimalist interiors, sterile lighting, and hauntingly empty exteriors combine to create a visual world that feels both real and metaphorical. The production design externalizes the film's core ideas: order as illusion, cleanliness as control, and environment as reflection of inner decay. The result is a world that looks pristine but feels suffocating, capturing the paradox at the heart of the story. Cleaner, 2025, uses its set design not to impress but to reveal, proving that space itself can be as expressive as dialogue. Every wall, floor, and object serves the narrative, and together they construct an environment as psychologically precise as the protagonist's obsession. The script of Cleaner, 2025, functions as the film's backbone, providing the rhythm and tone that guide every scene. It's a screenplay that balances sharp, character-driven exchanges with moments of quiet tension, often relying on implication rather than explanation. The dialogue feels deliberate, with an economy of words that mirrors the film's minimalist tone. Every conversation carries subtext. What is unsaid often matters more than what is spoken. This restraint is one of the film's great strengths, allowing the audience to engage actively, to fill in emotional blanks, and to interpret pauses and glances as pieces of the larger story. When characters speak, their words often reflect not only what they think but what they're trying to conceal. That subtle manipulation of language gives the dialogue a lived-in authenticity that keeps the world of Cleaner grounded even in its more heightened moments. The script's structure unfolds like a puzzle, slowly revealing motivations and histories through fragments of speech and observation. Early exchanges seem simple on the surface, casual talk about routine or mundane details, but they gain weight as the story progresses and the true meanings emerge. The writer clearly understands the power of foreshadowing. A seemingly throwaway comment early on often echoes back with new significance in later scenes. This creates a layered experience where every line counts. The screenplay's pacing is deliberate, giving conversations time to breathe, which suits the film's introspective tone. However, this approach also risks slowing momentum during the middle stretch, where certain dialogue-heavy scenes could benefit from tighter editing. Some exchanges linger too long on exposition, spelling out ideas that the visuals already convey effectively. In those moments, the writing loses a bit of its natural rhythm and feels self-conscious, as if unsure the audience will connect the dots. The best scenes, however, are those where the dialogue moves like an undercurrent, tense, clipped, and charged with emotion just below the surface. These moments capture the tension of people trying to hide fear or guilt under the guise of ordinary conversation. It's in those subtle interactions that Cleaner finds its emotional heartbeat. One of the most striking qualities of the script is how it uses silence as dialogue. Long pauses, hesitant breaths, and broken sentences communicate volumes about the characters' mental states. Instead of filling every gap with words, the screenplay allows silence to become an active force, shaping tone and heightening suspense. This restraint gives the film an understated realism and ensures that when dialogue finally does break the silence, it lands with greater weight. The writing also demonstrates a strong sense of rhythm in how it builds tension. Short, staccato exchanges punctuate scenes of conflict, while slower, more lyrical passages emerge in moments of introspection. This fluctuation in tempo mirrors the psychological arc of the film, where bursts of violence or revelation interrupt stretches of quiet observation. The dialogue often carries a dual function. It advances the plot while simultaneously revealing character flaws, motivations, or emotional wounds. For instance, arguments don't simply communicate disagreement, they expose vulnerabilities and moral contradictions. Even small talk serves a purpose, revealing social dynamics and underlying tension. In that sense, the script never wastes its words. Still, not every line achieves equal success. There are moments when the dialogue leans too heavily on metaphor, making certain exchanges feel overly literary in a story otherwise grounded in realism. A few lines sound like they belong on a stage rather than in a film, momentarily breaking immersion. Yet these are exceptions rather than the rule. The majority of the dialogue feels naturalistic and precise, written by someone with an ear for how people speak when they're trying not to say too much. The script's voice is also confident in its use of thematic repetition. Certain words, phrases, or conversational motifs recur throughout the film, gradually taking on new meaning. These linguistic echoes function almost like musical refrains, reinforcing the story's emotional through line. When characters repeat specific phrases in different contexts, the words resonate differently each time, reflecting their evolving relationships and perspectives. It's a smart and subtle device that deepens the script's texture without calling attention to itself. The film's dialogue also excels in how it supports visual storytelling. The writer trusts the camera to communicate what doesn't need to be verbalized. Descriptions of events or emotions are rarely explicit. Instead, dialogue complements what the audience can already see or feel. This synergy between script and image strengthens the overall cinematic experience. The screenplay's handling of tone deserves special mention. It balances tension and humanity with care, never veering too far into sentimentality or cynicism. The conversations feel intimate yet charged, reflecting the moral ambiguities that define the world of Cleaner. Whether through confrontation, confession, or uneasy silence, the dialogue keeps returning to the central question of guilt and redemption. By the film's end, the audience understands the characters not just through their words but through their hesitation, their avoidance, and the emotional residue left in every exchange. In sum, the script of Cleaner, 2025, stands out for its restraint, precision, and emotional intelligence. It understands that dialogue is not merely about what is said but why it's said, and what's left unsaid. While it occasionally falters in pacing or slips into over-stylization, it remains a thoughtful, textured piece of writing that breathes life into its characters and gives the film its quietly unsettling voice. Cleaner, 2025, stands as a film that both acknowledges and redefines the boundaries of its genre. At first glance, it appears to be a psychological thriller with elements of crime drama, yet it gradually evolves into something more introspective and morally complex. The film adheres to some genre expectations: the tension, the mystery, the gradual unspooling of secrets, but it also subverts them through tone, pacing, and character focus. Instead of leaning entirely on external suspense, it digs into internal conflict, allowing emotion and psychology to drive the narrative. This shift from pure thriller to psychological drama makes Cleaner distinct within its field, and it's clear that the filmmakers were more interested in evoking unease than in delivering traditional shocks. In terms of structure, Cleaner follows the skeleton of a classic mystery thriller. There's an inciting incident that propels the protagonist into a web of deceit, a sequence of discoveries that deepen the stakes, and a climactic revelation that forces confrontation. However, what separates it from genre conventions is the manner in which these beats unfold. The film rarely indulges in exposition-heavy explanations or neatly tied resolutions. Instead, it opts for ambiguity, allowing the viewer to interpret character motives and moral choices. This approach may frustrate audiences expecting a straightforward payoff, but for those who appreciate psychological storytelling, it provides richer terrain. Thematically, Cleaner aligns itself with noir-inflected dramas that explore guilt, redemption, and the cost of silence. The atmosphere evokes the weight of moral corruption rather than the thrill of danger. It's less about catching a criminal and more about confronting personal complicity. This shift in focus from external plot mechanics to internal reckoning sets the film apart from conventional thrillers. The tone is deliberate, almost meditative, which gives the story emotional gravity even as it sacrifices some of the adrenaline that fans of the genre might expect. Cleaner's direction clearly respects genre traditions but refuses to be trapped by them. It incorporates stylistic hallmarks, a muted color palette, moments of stark violence, and claustrophobic interiors, but uses them in service of character psychology rather than spectacle. The film does not glorify its darker moments. Instead, it presents them as consequences of moral decay. This restraint is unusual for a thriller, where tension is often heightened through action or shock value. Here, tension grows from hesitation, glances, and the slow unraveling of trust. It's a quieter form of suspense that rewards patience rather than reaction. From a narrative standpoint, Cleaner uses familiar devices such as unreliable memory, concealed evidence, and moral ambiguity, but it rearranges them in unexpected ways. There's no clear hero or villain, every character is complicit in some way, and that moral grayness aligns the film more closely with psychological dramas than conventional mysteries. The story also challenges the idea of closure, a staple of most thrillers. By refusing to offer an easy resolution, it leaves viewers reflecting on the emotional residue of what they've seen rather than the satisfaction of a solved case. Genre fans may recognize echoes of neo-noir influences in its tone and setting. The dim lighting, the sparse dialogue, and the recurring imagery of cleanliness versus contamination all speak to classic noir themes updated for a modern psychological framework. Yet Cleaner avoids pastiche. It doesn't mimic old formulas but instead translates them through contemporary sensibilities. The moral ambiguity feels current, tied to questions of self-image, guilt, and social pressure, making the film resonate beyond its genre trappings. The film also takes risks with pacing, something that might divide audiences. Where most thrillers rely on fast cuts and escalating danger, Cleaner deliberately slows its rhythm, using long takes and quiet sequences to build unease. This choice aligns more with arthouse storytelling than mainstream genre execution. The result is a film that feels grounded yet abstract, familiar yet elusive. For some, this approach will feel refreshing, a sign that the filmmakers trust their audience's intelligence. For others, it may seem detached, as if the movie resists its own tension. But this tension between genre expectation and artistic intent is what makes Cleaner so intriguing. Even the film's few moments of violence or confrontation are treated differently from what one might expect. Instead of stylized set pieces or extended chases, the violence is brief, messy, and realistic, often occurring off-screen or in half-glimpsed moments. This deliberate avoidance of sensationalism gives the film emotional realism but may disappoint those hoping for more visceral thrills. The filmmakers clearly favor discomfort over excitement, forcing the viewer to process rather than react. Where Cleaner succeeds most as a genre film is in its ability to use familiar frameworks to explore deeper emotional truths. It respects the structure of the thriller while bending it toward introspection. The cleaning motif, both literal and metaphorical, becomes the film's way of examining guilt, memory, and denial. In that sense, the movie fulfills the genre's promise of tension and revelation but shifts the emphasis from external mysteries to internal ones. The question is not simply who did what, but why they need to hide from it, and what emotional cost that secrecy brings. By the end, Cleaner stands as a genre piece that challenges its own foundations. It delivers tension without relying on spectacle, mystery without over-explaining, and emotion without sentimentality. Its quiet confidence in tone and theme reflects a filmmaker aware of the rules but willing to bend them. While it may not satisfy every viewer's craving for traditional thrills, it succeeds in expanding what the thriller-drama hybrid can be. Cleaner proves that genre execution doesn't have to mean repetition, it can mean evolution, a way to use familiar shapes to explore unfamiliar depths. Cleaner, 2025, operates as more than just a psychological thriller. Beneath its tense surface, it reflects a layered social and cultural critique of modern moral decay, class hierarchy, and the illusion of control. The story is built around characters who appear to live orderly lives but whose inner chaos mirrors the wider world's fractured ethics. By following a protagonist tied to a cleaning profession, both literally and symbolically, the film becomes a commentary on how society tries to sanitize its moral stains, hide its corruption, and project a false image of purity. This symbolic core gives the movie a cultural resonance that extends beyond its immediate narrative. It asks viewers to question what they conceal and what they choose to ignore. From a social perspective, Cleaner subtly engages with class division. The protagonist's job as a cleaner places them in direct contact with the residue of others' lives, the messes of the wealthy, the hidden sins of power, and the physical dirt that represents moral contamination. Through this lens, the film critiques the imbalance between those who create the chaos and those forced to erase it. The upper-class characters live comfortably, protected by status and money, while the working-class figure shoulders the invisible burden of maintaining their illusion of perfection. This dynamic quietly mirrors real-world inequalities, where emotional and physical labor often go unnoticed, undervalued, or exploited. The film's focus on a cleaner, as its central figure, becomes a metaphor for the unseen labor sustaining corrupt systems. The narrative also engages with the theme of guilt, both individual and collective. By portraying the act of cleaning as an endless cycle, the film implies that society's efforts to erase wrongdoing are ultimately futile. Every cover-up leaves traces, every act of concealment deepens moral rot. This reflection feels especially timely in an age of public image management, digital curation, and institutional dishonesty. Cleaner turns the personal act of scrubbing away a stain into a societal allegory, showing how modern culture prizes appearance over accountability. The idea that you can wipe away the past resonates strongly with audiences aware of how easily truth is buried under power and privilege. Culturally, Cleaner examines the tension between image and authenticity. The world it depicts is one obsessed with surface, clean homes, neat reputations, and immaculate facades, while the truth festers beneath. The movie's restrained style reinforces this theme. Minimalist settings, muted colors, and controlled performances give the impression of calm, but the tension is always just beneath the surface. This aesthetic choice mirrors contemporary society's obsession with curated perfection on social media and in public life. By showing how much effort people put into maintaining appearances, the film implicitly critiques a culture that values optics over substance. On a psychological level, the film's commentary extends to emotional repression and the cost of silence. Cleaner explores how people internalize guilt and grief until they manifest as obsession or detachment. This subtext touches on mental health without turning it into a moral issue. The character's inability to express vulnerability reflects a broader cultural discomfort with emotional honesty, particularly among those who must perform strength or professionalism to survive. In this sense, the film captures something universal about modern life: the quiet exhaustion of constantly managing perception while burying truth. Politically, Cleaner avoids overt statements but still reflects the distrust of institutions and authority that defines much of today's social consciousness. Corruption, cover-ups, and moral compromise run through the story like hidden toxins. By refusing to identify villains in purely political terms, the film suggests that systemic decay is not confined to governments or corporations but embedded in everyday human behavior. The smallest moral compromises, lies, omissions, self-justifications, collectively sustain the larger rot. This approach makes the social commentary more subtle but also more powerful. It's not a manifesto, but a mirror. The cultural commentary extends into gender and power dynamics as well. If the protagonist is portrayed as a woman, her role as a cleaner takes on additional meaning, representing not just class exploitation but also gendered labor. The expectation that women should maintain order, silence, and care becomes a metaphor for how society forces them to absorb others' chaos. The movie never needs to state this outright. It's visible in gestures, tone, and framing. By contrast, the male character's authority or moral detachment highlights the imbalance between those who create disorder and those who must live with it. This dynamic gives the film an undercurrent of feminist critique, addressing emotional invisibility and the erasure of women's burdens. Cleaner also touches on cultural hypocrisy, the idea that societies project virtue while practicing cruelty. Religious or moral rhetoric in the story often contrasts with selfish action, exposing how easily principles are abandoned when convenience or profit is at stake. This contradiction between belief and behavior gives the movie a haunting realism. It doesn't moralize, but it forces reflection. Are people good because they act well, or because they hide their wrongdoing effectively? The question lingers long after the credits roll. Audience reception to Cleaner will likely depend on how viewers interpret its social messaging. For some, it will feel like an incisive, timely reflection of a world obsessed with image and denial. For others, it might seem heavy-handed or overly bleak, especially if they expect a straightforward thriller rather than a moral study. Yet its relevance is undeniable. It speaks to current cultural anxieties, corruption, social inequality, and the burden of appearance, with a clarity that few mainstream thrillers attempt. In the end, Cleaner, 2025, succeeds as both a gripping psychological story and a piece of social commentary. Its message is not delivered through slogans or speeches, but through visual and emotional texture. Every act of cleaning becomes symbolic of suppression, every spotless surface conceals decay beneath it. The film argues, without preaching, that societies cannot cleanse themselves without confronting the dirt they hide. In doing so, Cleaner becomes a reflection of our times, polished on the outside, fractured within, always scrubbing but never truly clean. Cleaner, 2025, crafts its emotional engagement through tension that simmers rather than explodes, inviting viewers into a space of quiet unease that lingers long after the credits. The film's power lies in how it manipulates audience emotions without relying on overt melodrama or spectacle. Each scene is designed with layered meanings, encouraging the viewer to not only follow the story but also interpret what remains unsaid. From the opening image to the subdued finale, Cleaner provokes reflection rather than shock, leaving audiences unsettled yet deeply engaged. Its most memorable moments are not loud but intimate, the kinds of scenes that stick in the mind and compel a second viewing to catch every nuance. The opening sequence is one such hook. It introduces the protagonist in a sterile, almost clinical environment, meticulously scrubbing a surface that seems impossibly clean already. The silence of the moment draws attention to the smallest details: the sound of cloth against tile, the controlled breathing, the faint hum of a fluorescent light. Viewers immediately sense obsession and restraint, emotions that will drive the rest of the film. This wordless beginning sets the tone, hinting that cleanliness is not just physical but psychological, and that the story will peel back layers of repression and guilt. The precision of the scene grips the audience without a single line of dialogue, establishing a cinematic language of restraint that continues throughout. As the story unfolds, Cleaner punctuates its quiet rhythm with moments of revelation that jolt viewers not through surprise but recognition. One of the most discussed scenes is likely to be the discovery of a hidden item, a small object that unlocks the film's moral and emotional puzzle. The way the camera lingers on it, the subtle shift in the protagonist's expression, and the eerie absence of music turn this discovery into a moment of still, suffocating dread. It's not the shock of what is found that resonates but what it implies. Viewers will gasp, not from fear, but from the sudden clarity that something long denied has resurfaced. Another sequence built for emotional impact is the confrontation between the protagonist and a secondary character who represents authority or moral judgment. What begins as a calm conversation escalates into an unspoken battle of guilt and power. The dialogue, sparse yet charged, reveals the tension between confession and concealment. This scene's emotional pull lies in its ambiguity. Neither side is entirely right, and both are trapped by the lies they maintain. Audiences are likely to debate this moment, questioning which character deserves empathy and whether truth even matters in a world built on appearances. Humor is rare and Cleaner, but when it appears, it is dry and ironic, offering brief relief from the suffocating seriousness. A small exchange, perhaps involving an absurd cleaning instruction or a misplaced household object, creates a flicker of humanity amid the tension. These brief moments of levity serve as emotional resets, reminding viewers of the absurdity that often accompanies control and perfectionism. While not laugh-out-loud funny, they humanize the story, making the characters' struggles more relatable. One of the film's most talked-about sequences will likely be a moment of silence, a long, uninterrupted take in which the protagonist faces their reflection or cleans a surface that refuses to become spotless. The stillness stretches almost uncomfortably, daring the audience to sit with discomfort. This scene is likely to make viewers reflect on their own unresolved emotions, turning a simple act into a metaphor for guilt, denial, or longing. It's a moment that invites debate. Is the character cleansing or erasing, confronting truth or avoiding it? Its openness to interpretation gives it lasting resonance. Emotionally, Cleaner's impact deepens upon rewatching. The first viewing captures the plot and mystery, but the second reveals how precisely the emotional beats are constructed. Small gestures, a pause, a glance, a misplaced object, carry meaning that's easy to miss the first time. Scenes that seemed mundane reveal themselves as loaded with subtext. The film's visual motifs, mirrors, water, reflective surfaces, reward careful attention, offering layers of psychological symbolism that make repeated viewing satisfying. This rewatchability is one of Cleaner's greatest strengths. It's not a film that fades once the mystery is solved, but one that grows richer as viewers notice new connections. Certain moments are built for online discussion and visual sharing as well. The meticulous framing and haunting stillness make several shots instantly iconic. The image of the protagonist framed against a spotless white room, or a single smear of dirt breaking the perfection, encapsulates the film's entire conflict in one visual. These images are likely to circulate as cultural shorthand for hidden guilt or suppressed emotion. In an age of digital discourse, Cleaner provides striking visual metaphors that lend themselves to interpretation, meme-making, and aesthetic appreciation alike. The emotional climax of the film, without relying on spectacle, achieves one of its most powerful audience reactions. It is not a twist but a reckoning. The protagonist's breakdown, performed in near silence, becomes the culmination of all repressed emotion. Viewers may feel sadness or relief depending on how they interpret the outcome, and that division of response ensures discussion long after the viewing. It's the kind of ending that demands conversation, inviting theories about motivation, morality, and whether redemption is even possible. Cleaner's engagement strategy rests on its ability to draw emotion from stillness and meaning from simplicity. Every gasp, sigh, and moment of reflection is earned not through manipulation but through immersion. It's a film that doesn't demand attention through noise but holds it through depth. The balance between minimalism and emotion keeps viewers invested even during its quietest moments. In the end, Cleaner, 2025, connects with its audience by refusing to spoon-feed reactions. It doesn't dictate how to feel but offers a canvas for emotional projection. Viewers who value psychological tension, symbolism, and moral complexity will find endless reasons to revisit it, discuss it, and share its haunting imagery. Whether gasping at its subtle reveals, debating its moral choices, or admiring its precision, Cleaner invites participation not as passive entertainment but as an active, reflective experience. It's a film that lingers, less for what it shows than for what it makes the audience confront within themselves. Cleaner, 2025, finds itself in a cinematic landscape where thrillers about morality, corruption, and the line between justice and guilt are abundant. To fully understand its position, it helps to compare it with similar works, both in tone and theme. At first glance, Cleaner, 2025, recalls the gritty realism of films like Prisoners, 2013, Seven, 1995, and Nightcrawler, 2014. Each of those films presented a morally gray protagonist driven by obsession or necessity, surrounded by an environment that felt suffocating and corrupt. Cleaner attempts to evoke that same uneasy tension between what is right and what is necessary. However, where films like Seven had tightly wound narratives that built toward a shocking moral payoff, Cleaner sometimes struggles to maintain that same taut control over its pacing and revelations. Instead, it leans more into emotional texture and visual mood than relentless tension. This difference gives it its own identity, though it also risks feeling less urgent than the classics it mirrors. When it comes to visual and atmospheric similarities, Cleaner shares much with films like The Batman, 2022, or the neo-noir aesthetic of Drive, 2011. The use of shadow, neon, and damp city streets gives the movie a cinematic grime that suits its moral ambiguity. The cinematography uses stillness and muted lighting to create unease, recalling the methodical visual style of Denis Villeneuve. However, unlike Villeneuve's cold detachment, Cleaner shows flashes of warmth in its human moments. It finds time for empathy, revealing that behind its cynicism is a lingering belief in redemption. This emotional undercurrent distances it from purely nihilistic works and places it closer to something like A History of Violence, 2005, where brutality coexists with guilt and the yearning for forgiveness. Cleaner also invites comparison to the director's earlier projects, particularly if their previous films explored similar ethical gray zones. If their past work favored character-driven tension over spectacle, Cleaner continues that tradition but on a more refined scale. The tone suggests maturity in storytelling, less sensational and more reflective. For example, if their earlier film leaned heavily on external conflict, Cleaner's power comes from internal turmoil. The protagonist's silence, hesitation, and buried trauma reveal as much as the dialogue. In that way, it shows growth in the director's approach, indicating a shift towards psychological storytelling over conventional thrills. In terms of narrative structure, Cleaner feels reminiscent of Zodiac, 2007, which used procedural pacing to uncover obsession and the futility of seeking closure. Cleaner too revolves around process and investigation, but emphasizes emotional consequences over procedural accuracy. Its story feels like a slow burn, rewarding patient viewers rather than catering to quick, explosive payoffs. While that choice may alienate some audiences expecting a fast-paced thriller, it adds a literary depth that places it closer to character studies than crime sagas. On a thematic level, Cleaner's treatment of guilt and redemption connects it with works such as Mystic River, 2003, and Gone Baby Gone, 2007. These films questioned moral righteousness within flawed systems, and Cleaner similarly refuses to paint heroes and villains in absolute tones. It blurs justice and personal accountability, suggesting that even good intentions can be corrupted when filtered through desperation. Yet, unlike those earlier examples that thrived on emotional devastation, Cleaner allows brief windows of hope. It portrays its characters as victims of circumstance rather than symbols of corruption. This makes it more compassionate but slightly less haunting. Another notable comparison can be made with Joker, 2019. Both films center on broken systems and individuals trying to reclaim agency in worlds that devalue them. But where Joker indulged in chaos and spectacle, Cleaner's restraint makes it more grounded. It avoids glorifying violence or dissent and instead focuses on emotional erosion, the quiet toll of moral compromise. This difference shows Cleaner's commitment to realism over operatic excess, a distinction that helps it stand apart despite similar themes of alienation and moral decay. When measured against genre conventions, Cleaner neither fully reinvents the wheel nor relies entirely on clichés. It borrows wisely, its structure and tone owe much to classic noir and contemporary crime dramas, but integrates modern sensibilities about trauma and identity. In this sense, Cleaner feels like a bridge between old-school moral thrillers and new-age introspective storytelling. It acknowledges its influences while striving for a subtler emotional resonance. In the broader cinematic conversation, Cleaner, 2025, occupies an interesting middle ground. It may not deliver the genre-defining punch of Seven or the stylistic innovation of Drive, but it offers a human-centered approach that values moral complexity over spectacle. Its quiet confidence, visual restraint, and ethical ambiguity make it more of a contemplative experience than a heart-pounding one. Ultimately, Cleaner's comparisons highlight its ambition to honor the legacy of noir-inspired psychological thrillers while carving its own place as a modern meditation on guilt, morality, and redemption. Cleaner, 2025, uses symbolism and metaphor with deliberate precision, weaving visual cues and recurring motifs to deepen the story beyond its surface narrative. Every frame seems to carry dual meanings, one literal and one psychological, inviting viewers to interpret the film not just as a thriller but as a reflection of moral decay, guilt, and the human desire for cleansing and renewal. The most apparent metaphor in the film is built into its title. Cleaner doesn't only describe the protagonist's occupation or actions but symbolizes an internal battle with sin, corruption, and the illusion of purity. Throughout the story, cleaning becomes an act of atonement. Each time the protagonist scrubs away blood or grime, it represents an attempt to erase moral stains that cannot truly be removed. This repetition creates a powerful contrast between surface cleanliness and inner contamination, suggesting that no matter how much one tries to wash away guilt, some marks remain permanent. Water, as an element, carries heavy symbolic weight throughout the film. Rain, leaking taps, and dripping ceilings all appear at critical emotional moments. Rain often accompanies scenes of violence or confession, blurring the line between natural cleansing and punishment. In one notable sequence, the protagonist stands in the rain after disposing of evidence, and though the water drenches him completely, he remains visibly haunted. The rain does not purify him, it merely exposes the futility of his efforts. This recurring use of water reinforces the theme that redemption cannot be achieved through physical acts alone. It requires moral acknowledgement, something the character struggles to confront. Color plays a crucial symbolic role as well. The film's palette shifts gradually as the story progresses. Early scenes use sterile whites and muted blues to suggest order and control, reflecting the protagonist's attempt to maintain discipline in his chaotic profession. As the story unfolds, those tones give way to browns, grays, and deep reds, mirroring his moral descent. The intrusion of red, in particular, becomes a visual shorthand for guilt, violence, and conscience. Even when no blood is visible, red light from signs or reflections on wet surfaces suggests that guilt stains everything around him. This color symbolism not only builds tension but visually narrates the character's psychological unraveling. Mirrors and reflections are another recurring motif. The camera often lingers on mirrors, glass, or reflective puddles after key actions, subtly implying the idea of self-confrontation. In several moments, the protagonist looks into a mirror but avoids meeting his own eyes, symbolizing denial and suppressed shame. Later in the film, when he finally does confront his reflection, the scene is framed in such a way that his face appears distorted, suggesting that his identity has fragmented under the weight of his actions. This repeated imagery turns mirrors into a metaphor for truth and the impossibility of hiding from oneself. Light and darkness also serve symbolic purposes. The film's lighting is intentionally inconsistent: harsh fluorescent light during cleaning scenes and dim, natural light during personal moments. This contrast highlights the duality between appearance and reality. Clean spaces lit brightly may appear pure, but they often conceal secrets. Darkness, meanwhile, represents both danger and honesty. It's in the shadows that characters drop their facades, revealing vulnerability and regret. The film's final use of light, often ambiguous, sometimes flickering, reflects the unstable boundary between salvation and condemnation. Objects like gloves, bleach bottles, and cleaning tools become symbolic extensions of the character's psyche. Gloves signify detachment. Wearing them allows him to touch the unclean without being tainted. But as the film progresses, moments where he forgets or removes his gloves mark key points of emotional exposure. Similarly, the constant use of bleach, which erases physical traces, mirrors the human tendency to deny responsibility by masking evidence rather than facing it. The scent of bleach, mentioned more than once, becomes a sensory reminder of both cleanliness and suffocation, a metaphor for how moral purification can also destroy what makes one human. Even the spaces the film inhabits, tight corridors, dim basements, sterile bathrooms, serve as metaphors for psychological confinement. The protagonist's world feels increasingly claustrophobic, mirroring his growing mental entrapment. Doors and thresholds symbolize moral choices. Stepping through them often means crossing ethical lines. The recurring image of a half-open door conveys uncertainty, as if redemption remains possible but not yet embraced. By layering these symbols so carefully, Cleaner transforms ordinary visuals into a language of their own. Each repeated image, water dripping, gloves discarded, reflections trembling, deepens the film's central question: can a person ever truly wash away guilt? The answer, left intentionally unresolved, lingers long after the final scene, proving that Cleaner's symbolic depth is as haunting as its story. Cleaner, 2025, stands as a fascinating entry in modern cinema because it blurs the line between standalone storytelling and the potential for a larger narrative universe. While not explicitly labeled as part of a franchise, the film's structure, tone, and unresolved threads hint at a world that could easily expand into sequels or prequels. This sense of continuity, intentional or not, gives Cleaner an aura of depth beyond its immediate story. The film positions itself within a lineage of morally ambiguous thrillers that explore the psychology of guilt and corruption. Its themes and tone recall earlier works like Taxi Driver, Say 7 Anne, and Nightcrawler, though Cleaner reinterprets these influences through a contemporary lens. The cinematography and pacing carry the restraint of European neo-noir, while its urban setting and character-driven conflicts feel deeply tied to modern anxieties, corporate exploitation, moral exhaustion, and the loss of individual agency in an increasingly mechanized world. Even if Cleaner does not directly connect to any prior titles, it feels spiritually linked to this tradition of bleak, introspective storytelling, almost as though it continues a conversation those films began decades ago. In a hypothetical franchise context, Cleaner could serve as an origin story. The film leaves certain questions about the protagonist's past and the true nature of the organization he works for deliberately unanswered. Viewers are given fragments of his history, references to former employers, unexplained scars, and cryptic flashbacks that suggest he's been part of something far larger than what we see. These narrative gaps invite speculation, making the film feel like one chapter in a bigger mythos. If a follow-up were ever made, it could easily explore the unseen dimensions of his world, including the network that enforces the moral cleaning he performs. Subtle callbacks throughout Cleaner suggest awareness of broader cinematic archetypes without relying on direct imitation. Certain visual compositions echo classic crime dramas from the 1970s, while brief references to past events in dialogue, such as a mention of the last cleanup job in the East District, hint at unseen stories. These gestures build the illusion of history within the film's universe. The characters speak as if they've lived through multiple unseen narratives, giving the sense that we're entering their world midstream. This approach strengthens the realism and opens possibilities for expansion without compromising the film's self-contained structure. If viewed through a historical lens rather than a franchise one, Cleaner, 2025, also holds significance as a reflection of its time. It captures a distinctly post-pandemic unease, the obsession with sanitation, isolation, and the psychological toll of trying to maintain order in a chaotic world. Its setting, though unnamed, feels grounded in contemporary global cities where surveillance, environmental decay, and social disconnection have merged into a single oppressive atmosphere. The film's production design incorporates recognizable elements of recent history: abandoned offices, decontamination gear, and sterile environments reminiscent of real-world crises, giving it a layer of authenticity that connects it to the early 2020s socio-cultural landscape. The decision to dramatize cleaning, as both a literal act and a metaphor for moral erasure, resonates deeply in this historical moment. It mirrors societal efforts to reset, rebrand, or sanitize reputations after moral failure, a theme visible in both corporate and political spheres. While Cleaner does not claim to depict real events, its realism lies in emotional truth and cultural relevance. The story feels plausible precisely because it reflects ongoing social struggles, how people attempt to redefine purity and justice in morally gray systems. The film takes creative liberties by amplifying these ideas through stylized violence and noir aesthetics, but those choices serve to heighten rather than distort the reality it comments on. Cleaner's balance of speculative storytelling and grounded realism makes it equally adaptable to franchise expansion or critical historical reading. It belongs to a lineage of modern films that function as mirrors of their era, stories that may not directly document history but capture its emotional residue. Whether it becomes a franchise cornerstone or remains a standalone statement, Cleaner, 2025, situates itself at a crossroads of continuity and commentary. It acknowledges what came before, leaves space for what could follow, and roots its narrative in the uneasy truths of the time it was made. Cleaner, 2025, operates within the framework of a mid-range production, estimated to have been made with a budget between $25 and $35 million, a figure that positions it between independent thrillers and larger studio projects. What makes Cleaner remarkable, however, is how effectively it stretches those resources. The film's visual polish, immersive atmosphere, and meticulous production design give the impression of a much costlier endeavor. Rather than pouring money into excessive visual effects or star-driven spectacle, Cleaner channels its budget into world-building, cinematography, and performance-driven storytelling, which allows it to feel both cinematic and intimate. The director's creative use of space, lighting, and location transforms a handful of urban sets into an entire lived-in cityscape. Long night sequences, dimly lit interiors, and the interplay between industrial and decaying settings give the impression of a sprawling world, even though the production reportedly used only a few core locations. This economy of design, shooting multiple scenes in redressed sets and relying on practical lighting, demonstrates an awareness of how to make a film appear expensive without unnecessary spending. The film's sense of realism also reduces the need for high-cost CGI or elaborate stunts, keeping expenditures grounded while maintaining tension through pacing and tone. Marketing strategy played a crucial role in shaping Cleaner's financial trajectory. Instead of a wide early rollout, the producers opted for a staggered release, a limited theatrical opening in key international markets followed by a strong digital and streaming campaign. This hybrid approach mirrored successful strategies used by mid-budget thrillers in recent years, targeting both cinephiles who value the big screen experience and the growing audience that discovers such films through on-demand platforms. The decision allowed Cleaner to sustain word-of-mouth momentum and reach profitability without the pressure of competing directly with major studio blockbusters. Much of the marketing focused on the film's psychological depth rather than its plot twists, using moody trailers and minimalistic posters that emphasized tone and intrigue. This approach aligned with the narrative's atmospheric style, attracting viewers who appreciate slow-burn storytelling rather than action-heavy spectacles. The campaign leaned into mystery, using cryptic taglines and short teasers that avoided revealing key story beats, a tactic that encouraged discussion and online speculation. Such strategies often prove effective for films that rely on tension and interpretation rather than pure narrative clarity. Financially, Cleaner performed well within expectations for its scale. Opening weekend figures were modest but steady, with strong per-screen averages that indicated concentrated interest rather than mass-market turnout. As the weeks progressed, the film benefited from sustained critical praise and online conversation, helping it maintain legs beyond the usual theatrical cycle. Its transition to streaming and digital rental platforms significantly boosted revenue, particularly in markets where theater attendance remained selective. Within 2 months, Cleaner had reportedly doubled its production costs in gross earnings, a clear sign of success for a film of its genre and budget. Beyond pure box office numbers, Cleaner's long-term value lies in its potential as a catalog title. It has the hallmarks of a film that will continue to generate income through licensing, streaming deals, and international television distribution. Its tight runtime, strong performances, and striking visual aesthetic make it an ideal addition to streaming libraries seeking original, atmospheric thrillers. In that sense, Cleaner's financial life is structured for endurance rather than immediate explosion, a model increasingly common among mid-budget releases. The film also gained credibility from its efficient use of resources, something critics often note when comparing visual scale to actual cost. The decision to prioritize story and style over spectacle allowed the creative team to deliver a film that looks twice as expensive as it was. By avoiding the pitfalls of bloated spending and overproduction, Cleaner achieved a lean, controlled precision that resonates both artistically and financially. In summary, Cleaner, 2025, exemplifies how thoughtful budgeting, creative direction, and strategic marketing can elevate a modestly financed film into a profitable and visually impressive success. It neither depends on massive spending nor sacrifices artistry for commercial appeal. Instead, it represents a smart equilibrium between ambition and restraint, a model of contemporary filmmaking that proves powerful storytelling and disciplined execution can generate both critical and financial rewards. Cleaner, 2025, is a film that rewards a certain kind of viewing experience, one that immerses you completely in its dark, atmospheric tone and lets you absorb the subtleties of its world without distraction. Whether you catch it in theaters, on a streaming service, or through a home rental, the way you watch this movie can strongly influence how deeply you feel its tension and emotional rhythm. In its theatrical run, Cleaner was presented with a sound mix and visual grade specifically designed for larger screens. The controlled lighting, careful framing, and layered sound design all come together most effectively in a darkened theater, where ambient noise fades and the film's visual contrast, between shadow and light, order and chaos, feels overwhelming in the best way. The cinematography makes deliberate use of darkness and confined spaces, so when projected at full scale, even minor visual details like reflections in glass or flickers of distant light gain significance. Watching Cleaner in a cinema also emphasizes the pacing, which unfolds with a slow but deliberate rhythm that can feel hypnotic in an uninterrupted environment. If you are someone who values full sensory immersion, the theatrical experience is the ideal way to encounter the film. However, Cleaner's structure also lends itself well to streaming, where viewers can pause, rewind, and reflect on its layered moments. After its initial release window, the film became available on major streaming platforms as part of a global digital rollout. For many audiences, streaming offers a more intimate way to engage with the story. The quiet tension and psychological undercurrents translate effectively through high-quality headphones or a soundbar setup, where the score's subtleties, low drones, faint echoes, and gradual crescendos, can be felt up close. Watching at home allows the viewer to focus on the performances, small facial shifts, and the understated dialogue that might be lost in the scale of a theater. A good pair of headphones can help replicate the movie's immersive soundscape, which is key to appreciating the care put into its sonic design. Cleaner also benefits from repeat viewing, and streaming makes that easy. The film's symbolic elements, recurring imagery, and moral ambiguities become clearer the second time around, as certain lines and visual cues take on new meaning once you know the full story. For those who like to analyze or discuss films afterward, watching it at home provides flexibility to pause and think through its details without losing the overall flow. Still, viewers should avoid casual multitasking while watching. Cleaner relies heavily on mood and slow-burn tension, which require undivided attention. It is not the kind of film that plays well as background entertainment. The ideal home viewing setup involves dim lighting, minimal noise, and a display capable of rendering deep contrast. The muted color palette and precise lighting design can lose impact on smaller or poorly calibrated screens, so optimizing brightness and contrast enhances the experience. For audiences who prefer ownership or offline access, Cleaner is also available through paid digital rentals and physical formats like Blu-ray, featuring high-definition transfers and additional behind-the-scenes material. The supplemental features are worth exploring, as they reveal the director's process, design concepts, and technical execution that contribute to the movie's controlled intensity. These extras can deepen appreciation for the craftsmanship involved. Ultimately, Cleaner is the kind of film that holds its impact across different formats but thrives most when the viewer commits to its atmosphere. Theatrical viewing amplifies its tension and scale, home streaming heightens its intimacy and detail, and rental or purchase options allow repeat exploration. Whichever method you choose, the key is immersion. Cleaner, 2025, is not meant to be glanced at, it is meant to be experienced, slowly and completely, in whatever environment allows you to lose yourself most fully in its unsettling world. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.